2002 was a turning point for the sport of NASCAR. It was the final year of the former Winston Cup points format that produced a down-to-the-wire championship battle. Mark Martin, a perennial bridesmaid but never the bride, was one of the drivers involved in said battle. Like every season, the year began at Daytona. Martin began the season on a good note. After a topsy-turvy race with the front runners being taken out by accidents and actions out of their own making, as well as some in their own making, Martin would bring home a sixth-place finish. Daytona was followed up by an up-and-down run for Martin with 5 finishes of 11th or better, including 2 third-place runs. He also had 2 finishes of 21st or worse, though. The general good start would be enough to leave him third in points, 129 points back of leader Sterling Marlin after 8 races. The next race at Talladega could offer a great opportunity for the 6th team to gain points on Marlin. For a majority of the day, Martin played it safe and kept it clean, but it all changed on the 165th lap.
Trouble, Stewart in the wall.
Here we go. Here we go.
Robbie Gordon's in at the 33. Harvick is around.
Here we go, guys.
The big one.
Just a matter of time. And Bobby Labonte just got the 19 right at the very end of that wreck.
Mark Martin in the Viagra car running up front.
The crash caused Martin to lose 103 points and 6 positions in the standings. The hole would prove to be one of difficulty to dig out of, as Martin would finish 5th and 4th the following 2 races, but only gained 39 points on the leader of Marlin. He was now 4th in points, 193 back. After a week off from the points racing due to the Winston All-Star race, Martin and company needed to regroup and make sure that they could have some serious cuts into Sterling Marlin's points gap over them. The majority of the race was led by rookie sensation Jimmie Johnson, but Martin ran close to the front throughout the endurance race, keeping himself in position to compete for the win. Johnson's rookie experience showed, though, as with 40 to go, he slid into his pit stall, opening the door for Martin to take the Viagra team and get the victory.
And he's catching the cars in exactly the right places. He gets his nose down under him, puts the cars between he and Kinson. 1 to go, baby. White flag. Mark, you are the man tonight.
Mark Martin has never won the Noble $1 Million bonus. This is his 9th try at it. He hasn't won since April of 2002, agonizing years.
Boy, he's got just a little bit more traffic here. Here comes Kenseth.
A little bit for you. He's got a lot of traffic.
Kenseth is in worse shape. He's hung up back here as well.
Mark Martin has never won the 600 at Charlotte.
He has now.
Now he has. Mark Martin wins the Coca-Cola Racing family.
The win would bring Martin to 3rd in points, 147 back, now within a race of points in the lead. It seemed that Martin had really turned a corner on his season, but that was immediately put back the following week at Dover.
Bill was out there and he couldn't go high. The one's down low, and he just was in a box.
And I'm sure he was anticipating both these cars were going to slide. I mean, the straightaway's banked 9 degrees. Hold me, everybody.
The wreck relegated Martin to a 41st place finish and put him back to 6th in points, 222 back. Fortunately for Martin, though, he would go on a tear the following 5 races, finishing 2nd at Pocono, 9th at Michigan, 7th at Infineon, 5th at Daytona, and 9th at Chicagoland. The great run drew Martin up from 6th in points to 2nd, and from 222 back to only 49 back of Marlin. Martin had a little room to work with in the points, and with Marlin finishing 14th, barely ahead of Martin's 16th at New Hampshire, he was still only 55 points back past the halfway mark of the season. But Martin's championship run began to slide off course over the following weeks. While not losing too much with the mediocre 16th place run at New Hampshire, the mediocrity of 13th at Pocono and 28th at Indianapolis proved to cost Martin dearly, as he fell a spot in the standings at 3rd, now 109 points back. With Watkins Glen being the next race ahead, Martin needed to run a clean race and take advantage of his veteran experience. He funneled this into a top 10 run while championship leader Marlin suffered a 30th place finish. It drew Mark to within 53 points of the lead and into the 2nd spot. A top 5 at Michigan then cut it down to 40 markers. But the 6th team would start a trend that it would not easily be able to shake, the trend being of inconsistency. Races like Bristol and Darlington had finishes in the middle ground, like 23rd and 11th, but also races like Richmond would have a finish of 6th, top 10 run. Even so, due to the competition's wildly inconsistent runs of their own, the points only grew closer with 10 races remaining in the season. Martin was now only 9 points behind Marlin heading into New Hampshire, while rookie sensation Jimmie Johnson was 72 back in third, and four-time defending champion Jeff Gordon was only 82 back in fourth. And the hot-headed young gun of Tony Stewart was in fifth, 118 back of the points lead, lurking in the weeds. While Martin and Marlin ran mid-pack once again, it proved to be just enough, as the six would make crucial gains in the title race.
Now look at the championships point standings.
Sterling Marlin now would be 6 points behind.
Look at that top five.
Jeff Gordon just 67 back in fifth. Let's go to 6. See what that is. I don't have that.
And how about the fact that Marlin has led the championship since the second race of the season?
For Martin, it was the first time since August of 1997, over 5 years, that he had led the NASCAR Winston Cup points. It was time for Martin to come in clutch in crunch time. It looked as though he was beginning to do so, as the series headed to Dover. Just as he would prove to do from time and time again, years later, Martin's championship rival, Jimmie Johnson, was nearly untouchable at the Monster Mile.
By side stuff that was going to get him in trouble. His 27th birthday was this past Tuesday. There'll be a lot of candles to blow out in Victory Lane at Dover. Jimmie Johnson sweeps the Monster Mile this season.
But while the 48 gained maximum points, Martin had the next best points day, extending his lead to 30 points now over the rookie, with 8 races remaining. Once again, though, at Kansas, the inconsistency bug bit Martin. He would run mid-pack for much of the day and end up coming home in 25th, falling to second in points, now 11 points behind Hendrick rookie Jimmie Johnson. But points were the last thing on everyone's mind heading out of Kansas. Championship contender Sterling Marlin had his season cut short due to a violent crash on the 147th lap of the race.
Oh, hard into the wall. Sterling Marlin, a vicious crash.
And he's coming down to the inside and stopped just before he got to the inside wall.
Caution is out.
The wreck caused a fractured vertebra in Marlin's neck. The man who had led the points for 25 of the first 29 weeks of the season was out of the picture. As with all sports, though, the show had to go on, and the show would be seen the following week at Talladega. Talladega usually is seen as a race that would rewrite the championship battle year in and year out, but in 2002, it was a much more bizarre rewriting of the championship than usual. This is because the craziest event of the day came from the first and second place championship drivers before the race even started.
That wasn't it, buddy. It was mechanically bound. It was locked. It wasn't a fender.
What in the world? I have no idea.
He's talking like the way he's talking to Ben Leslie is all of a sudden it just locked up. He was turning it left and it would not turn back to the right. It just locked up.
With this, the door had immediately been wide open now for Tony Stewart to pounce. As with all large tracks in NASCAR, aerodynamics are a huge part of making speed. Pit stops offer a great opportunity at a restrictor plate race, though, to fix a torn-up race car, make it a winning car even, due to the fact that the caution laps are so long at this behemoth track. But the 2002 EA Sports 500 threw a championship curveball. It was a caution-free race that ended with fuel mileage. Due to this, it was difficult for both these drivers to have their cars fixed. Martin would end up finishing 30th, and Johnson would come home 37th after losing an engine. As for the aforementioned Stewart, he rode right behind the red 8 car to finish second and take a large 72-point advantage over the 6 team. Through the first 2/3 of the 31st race of the season at Lowe's, Martin minimized any damage in points that would happen by running in the top 10 for much of the night. But as the day did drift into night, Martin became an afterthought as he slogged home to a 16th place finish. The crippling mediocre finish dropped him back to third in points now, behind Stewart and Johnson, and put him 122 points out of the lead. Martin needed to buckle down and make one final run at the championship. And he did just that, as the 16th place finish at Lowe's was the last race of the season he finished lower than 10th. A 10th at Martinsville as well as an 8th at Atlanta were good enough for Martin to leapfrog over a fading Jimmie Johnson. But due to Stewart finishing 11th at Martinsville and 4th at Atlanta, it seemed as though the kill shot had been given with 3 races remaining. Not only would Martin have to continue his performance, but he'd need Stewart to falter. Both happened at Rockingham, as Stewart would finish 14th a lap down. And as for Martin,
And Benson's teammate, Kenny Schrader, is out of fuel on the apron.
White flag is up. Final lap at Rockingham. Fuel and the checkered flag. How's it going to play out? Benson protects the bottom in 1 and 2. Here comes Mark on the charge. So far, so good on fuel. Final corners ahead. Martin diving down low. One final charge off the last corner. It's not going to be enough. Johnny Benson is a NASCAR Winston Cup winner.
while he didn't win the race, Martin did win the points day. And the second place run would cut the gap down to 87 points, nearly half of what was between the 6 and the 20. But it wouldn't last long, as NASCAR would penalize Martin and the 6 team 25 points for illegal springs. Unhappy with the penalty, Jack Roush appealed, but it was upheld. So with 2 races left, Martin would now be 112 points behind Stewart. The great points day shifted to being a mildly good points day. The 112-point gap also meant that there were clinching scenarios more in play for Stewart if Martin faltered. He would only need to gain 73 points to have no possibilities of losing the title going into the final race. But Martin would have none of that. While Stewart occupied the back half of the top 10 for a majority of the day and finished 8th, Martin would occupy the top 5 and finish 4th. There would be a championship battle at Homestead in 2002, as 89 points separated Stewart and Martin.
Here comes Tony Stewart doing what no other NASCAR Winston Cup rookie has ever done.
The pressure is on Tony Stewart. In our sport, there's 1 winner and 42 losers. And I hate to lose.
The race would start well for Stewart, as he would start at the front of the field, while Martin would both literally and figuratively be chasing Stewart from the start, as he would be way in the back from the green flag. Martin would quickly carve his way through the pack, though, as he was in the top 20 by the 75th lap of the event. In order to win the championship, Stewart had to stay above 22nd position as well. He was doing this, as by the point that Martin had entered the top 20, Stewart was running in 8th. Due to a crash by Michael Waltrip, though, the field would be jumbled up and look a lot more different with strategy just past the 100-lap mark. Stewart and Martin would be the closest to each other that they had been all day. By the halfway point, Stewart had settled into 10th, while Martin began to fade back to the lower end of the top 20. The dreams of his elusive first championship were fading with each lost position and fading lap. Closing in on 100 laps to go, Martin slowly gained a few spots and Stewart began to fall down in the order. It was looking to start being Martin's final chance. With 100 to go, Martin was 12th, Stewart was 22nd, and the gap was now cut down to 59 points. Both drivers held serve until about the 200 lap mark. While Stewart was still mired in the pack, pit strategy put Martin to 6th with less than 70 to go. But he began to fade after about 35 laps and was back in 9th while Stewart stayed in 21st, just above where he needed to be to clinch. With 40 to go, the caution would come out. Stewart had been in the tail end of the field, right in front of the leader, but due to the late yellow, he would be able to catch up to the back of the pack and begin to make up more spots and clinch his title earlier. Stewart only made up a few spots, getting to 18th while Martin remained 6th. Another caution quickly flew, though. It would be the last of the year, setting up for a 24-lap sprint to the finish of the season. Stewart would stay steady in 18th, while Martin made his way all the way up to 4th. Once again, Martin and the Roush team would come up just short, finishing 2nd in points, only 38 behind the young Stewart. A year later, Martin's teammate Matt Kenseth would do what the driver of the 6 could not, win a championship. Roush would also get another title with young gun Kurt Busch the following year in 2004. As for Martin, after years of indecisiveness about his retirement, he would leave Roush after the 2006 season and finish the remainder of his career with different teams like Ginn Racing, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, Hendrick Motorsports, Michael Waltrip Racing, and have his final races be with Stuart Haas as a substitute driver for Tony Stewart of all people. In 2013, he would retire as arguably the best driver in NASCAR history to never win a championship at its top level. And it makes many wonder, what if Martin had garnered a few more wins? What if the wreck hadn't happened before the race at Talladega? What if there wasn't the 25-point penalty? What if, in 2002, Mark Martin would capture his missing ring?